With the reintroduction of the N1 Starfighter as Din Djarin's shiny new ride, we were treated to an exciting sequence that pretty clearly wants to draw parallels to pod racing, probably as a nod to Anakin's iconic line,
"Now this is pod racing,"
which was of course uttered in the cockpit of an N1 Starfighter. But as that line hints, the connection of the Naboo Starfighter to pod racing was already firmly established in The Phantom Menace from the very beginning. I will suggest to you that the Naboo Starfighter was actually meant to represent the thematic fulfillment of Anakin's podracer, a storytelling vehicle to illustrate Anakin's growth and rapid rise to greatness through direct visual parallels. And although I haven't been able to find any official confirmation of this theory, I think the intention is pretty obvious. Looking at the design of the Naboo Starfighter, we can already see a nominal parallel to the basic design of a podracer. With the forward set engines and a trailing cockpit, they share the same fundamental layout, but this connection goes deeper if we take a look at earlier concept art for the Naboo Starfighter, which even includes this little arbitrary pod on top. You could almost imagine that there's a pod racer shape actually kind of hiding in here. At any rate, there's a really compelling subliminal vibe that evokes the pod racer shape without being particularly literal. But even with the production version of the Naboo Starfighter, we still get an interesting connection with the colors of the ship. Anakin flies a yellow fighter with a blue and silver droid in the back. Incidentally, blue and silver is precisely the colors of the cockpit section of Anakin's pod racer, where Anakin does all the sorts of in-flight maintenance that's normally handled by the astromech on a fighter. So Anakin is, in a sense, inhabiting R2-D2's role in his own pod racer. He is both pilot and mechanic, and the presence of R2-D2 specifically is foreshadowed by the paint job. And of course, both Anakin's pod racer and the Naboo Starfighter have yellow as the primary color of the rest of the vehicle. And if I left the video right there, I think you'd be fair in saying that I'm making maybe a little bit of a stretch here, but we've really only just gotten started, because not only are there external parallels, but the similarities go even deeper into the respective interiors of both of these vehicles. Dual control yokes are a particularly prominent element of both cockpits, and we also see that even the computer displays are similar. And the way that Anakin interacts with his podracer cockpit directly foreshadows the way he interacts with the cockpit of the Naboo Starfighter. Earlier in the film, we see that Anakin has an intimate familiarity with the technical function of every button and switch in his podracer, and although there's some temporary early confusion as to the controls of the Naboo Starfighter, he rapidly gains a mastery of its systems, and by the second time he starts up the ship, he's already a natural. It's almost like he kind of had a stalling start and then quickly solved the problem and then went on to save the day. Oh, right, yeah, the cinematography of the pod race perfectly parallels the ending battle. We literally get shots that directly mirror one another all throughout both of these scenes. We're clearly meant to be thinking pod racing, it's pod racing, that's a pod racer. And just as the similarities pile up too high to ignore, Anakin exclaims what we should all be thinking at this point.
"Now this is pod racing."
Anakin started with a rickety, homemade, mechanically unreliable contraption, and he grew up to inhabit the ultimate expression of that vehicle. He gives up the wobbly, amorphous instability of a pod racer for the sharp, highly defined Naboo Starfighter. And while he piloted a pod racer to win his own freedom, he would pilot the Naboo Starfighter to free an entire planet. We're clearly seeing a very strong case of multi-layered visual and thematic foreshadowing. And it's really interesting that just the deeper I went, the more I found. There's no way this wasn't intentional. But I couldn't find anything on this topic. If anybody knows of an interview or something with anybody who worked on this film who mentions this topic, I would love to hear about that. As a very visual guy myself, I love finding these really smart design decisions that are all throughout Star Wars. Star Wars really does remain one of the smartest visual works in history, and I hope you enjoy going on these obscure adventures as much as I do. Anyway, that's all for today. I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.